Stray dog begs for food at restaurant, but when workers follow him home, tears everywhere. The first rays of morning light filtered through the steam rising from the back alley of Maria's kitchen, where Marco sorted through produce deliveries. The routine was as familiar as his own heartbeat after 15 years of working at the family restaurant. But this morning was different. A pair of amber eyes watched intently from behind a stack of empty crates. "Hey there," Marco said softly, straightening up from his crouched position. The dog, a medium-sized mixed breed with copper-colored fur and white paws, didn't flee like the usual strays. Instead, it sat perfectly still, head tilted slightly, as if listening to a conversation only it could hear. Marco had seen plenty of street dogs over the years. Most were skittish, desperate creatures who fought over scraps and disappeared at the first sign of human contact. But this one was different. Its fur, though unkempt, was relatively clean. More striking was its demeanor, patient, almost dignified. "You hungry, boy?" Marco asked, reaching for a piece of leftover bread from yesterday's service. The dog, who he would later know as Cabero, approached with measured steps, gently took the offering from Marco's hand, and retreated a few paces. But instead of devouring it, the dog simply held the bread in its mouth and watched Marco with those intelligent eyes. "That's odd," Marco muttered, just as Sophia burst through the back door, her dark curls escaping from beneath her chef's cap. "Marco, those vegetables aren't going to prep themselves." She stopped mid-sentence, noticing their visitor. "Oh, who's this?" "Just showed up. Strangest thing, though. Won't eat the bread I gave him." They watched as Cabero turned and took a few steps toward the alley entrance, then looked back at them expectantly. I think he wants us to follow him," Sophia said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Marco checked his watch. They had an hour before the breakfast rush began. "Should we?" Sophia was already untying her apron. "How often does a dog ask for our help?" They followed Cabero through the awakening city streets, past shuttered storefronts and early morning commuters who barely gave them a second glance. The dog moved with purpose, occasionally pausing to ensure his human companions were still behind him. After several blocks, they turned into a narrow side street lined with rundown apartment buildings. Cabero led them to a small courtyard where, beneath a weathered wooden bench, two tiny puppies huddled together. But it was the elderly woman seated on the bench that caught their attention. She wore a threadbare sweater despite the morning chill, her silver hair neat, though her clothes showed signs of wear. The woman startled at their approach, then relaxed slightly when Cabero trotted over and placed the bread gently in her lap. "Oh, Cabero," she whispered, her voice crackling with emotion. "You didn't have to," she broke off, embarrassed at finding herself the object of strangers' attention. "He's yours?" Sophia asked gently, kneeling to examine the puppies. "Not exactly." The woman's hands trembled as she tore the bread into smaller pieces, offering some to the puppies who wiggled out from their hiding place. "He started visiting a few months ago, right after." She paused, swallowing hard. "After my Roberto passed, brought these little ones with him last week." "I think their mother," she didn't need to finish the sentence. "I'm Marco, and this is Sophia. We work at Maria's kitchen, where your friend here paid us a visit this morning." "Elena," the woman replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry if he bothered you. He's very clever, always finding ways to help, but I tell him not to beg." Sophia and Marco exchanged glances, a wordless conversation passing between them. In that moment, they understood that Cabero hadn't just led them to puppies in need, he'd brought them to something far more important. "Elena," Sophia said, rising from her crouch beside the puppies, "would you and your friends like to join us for breakfast? Maria's kitchen serves the best eggs in the city, and we'd love the company." Elena's eyes welled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." "Please," Marco interrupted gently. "Any friend of Cabrero's is a friend of ours." As they walked back to the restaurant, Sophia carrying one puppy and Marco the other, with Cabrero trotting proudly beside Elena. The morning sun painted the city in shades of gold. None of them could have known then how this simple act of following a dog would change all their lives. But something in the air, a sense of possibility, of connections forming, suggested this was just the beginning of a remarkable story. The news of Cabarro and Elena spread through Maria's kitchen like the aroma of fresh-baked bread. By the end of that first week, the copper-colored dog had become something of a local celebrity, greeting regular customers with gentle dignity and escorting Elena to and from the restaurant each morning. The puppies, now named Luna and Sol, spent their days in a makeshift pen in the restaurant's office, their playful yips occasionally drawing delighted peeks from dining patrons. But it was Elena who underwent the most remarkable transformation. That first morning, she'd barely touched her eggs, embarrassed by her circumstances and the staff's kindness. Now she sat at what had become her table near the kitchen,
sharing stories with customers who become friends, her eyes bright with renewed purpose. She used to be a teacher, Sofia told Marco one afternoon, as they watched Elena entertaining a young family with an improvised story about Cabarro's adventures. 43 years teaching literature to high school students. Can you imagine all that knowledge, all those stories, just sitting alone in that courtyard? Marco nodded, his hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of kneading dough. Yesterday, she helped me calculate the week's inventory in half the time it usually takes. But did you notice she's wearing the same sweater again? I noticed. Sofia's voice dropped lower. And she's been sharing most of her meals with Cabarro and the puppies. I followed her home last night, just to make sure she was safe, she added quickly, seeing Marco's raised eyebrow. That building she's in, Marco, the electricity was out in the whole place. In this heat, the kitchen door swung open as Maria herself swept in, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual tight bun. At 68, she still commanded her restaurant with the energy of someone half her age. Are you two going to gossip all day? Or are we running a restaurant here? Mama, Marco began, wiping his hands on his apron. We need to talk about Elena. Maria's stern expression softened as she glanced through the kitchen window where Elena sat with Cabarro at her feet. Yes, we do. Come to my office, both of you. Inside the small office, Luna and Sol tumbled over each other in their pen, racing to greet them. Maria sank into her chair with a sigh, absently scratching behind Sol's ears as the puppy attempted to climb into her lap. I've been doing some checking, she said without preamble. Elena's husband's pension was tied up in that banking scandal last year, the one that wiped out thousands of retirees. She's been surviving on savings, but they're almost gone. The building she's in is scheduled for demolition next month. She hasn't told anyone because she's too proud to ask for help. Sofia dropped into the spare chair, her face pale. Where will she go? That's what we're going to figure out. Maria pulled out a worn leather notebook, her planning book, as the staff called it. Every major decision in the restaurant's 30-year history had been sketched out in those pages. I've been thinking about expanding our community outreach program. Marco leaned against the desk, his expression thoughtful. The cooking classes for kids. More than that, much more. Maria flipped open the notebook. We have that empty space upstairs. The one we used for storage before we got the warehouse deal could be converted into a small apartment. And we've been talking about adding breakfast cooking classes for seniors. You want to give Elena a job? Sofia's face lit up. She'd be perfect for teaching and with her organizational skills. And the apartment would come with the position, Maria continued, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Of course, it would need some renovation. The plumbing's solid, but it needs updating, painting, furniture. I can help with that, Marco said quickly. My cousin Carlos is a contractor. He owes me a favor after that catering job last month. And I know some design students who'd love to help decorate. They're always looking for portfolio projects, Sofia added, already pulling out her phone. Good. Maria made a few notes. But we have to handle this delicately. Elena has her pride. We're not offering charity. We're offering an opportunity. The restaurant needs someone to coordinate our community programs, handle administrative work, and teach classes. She's qualified, and we'd be foolish not to hire her. A soft whine drew their attention to the door, where Cabarro sat watching them, his amber eyes seeming to understand every word. Behind him stood Elena, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I was looking for Sophia. There's a customer asking about gluten-free options." I didn't mean to overhear. Maria stood, her movement purposeful but gentle. "Elena, come in. Close the door. We need to talk business." What followed was a conversation that would change not just Elena's life, but the entire character of Maria's kitchen. Elena initially protested, tears streaming down her face as she insisted she couldn't accept such generosity. But Maria, with decades of experience handling stubborn family members and employees alike, was masterful in her approach. "You have skills we need," she stated firmly. "Experience we value. The apartment is part of the compensation package. Many restaurants provide housing for key staff. As for the puppies and Cabero," she added, watching Luna attempt to crawl into Elena's lap, "every proper restaurant needs a mascot. Or 3. 2 hours later, Elena sat in stunned silence, holding a contract that outlined her new position as Community Programs Coordinator for Maria's Kitchen. Sophia had already left to meet with her design students, while Marco was on the phone with Carlos, discussing renovation plans. "I don't know what to say," Elena whispered, scratching Cabero's ears as he rested his head on her knee. "Say yes," Maria replied simply. "Say you'll help us build something special here. These cooking classes you suggested, teaching basic nutrition and budgeting to people struggling to make ends meet, that's exactly what this community needs. And who better to organize it than someone who understands both teaching and..." She paused delicately. "The challenges our students might be facing?" Elena's back straightened, her teacher's instincts rising to the surface. "We could partner with the literacy program at the library," she said slowly. "Combine reading skills with practical cooking knowledge. And maybe a program for seniors living alone, teaching them to cook for one while providing social connections." Maria smiled, watching the spark of purpose ignite in Elena's eyes. This was what she'd seen in the woman from the first day, not just someone in need of help, but someone with the power to help others, if only given the chance. As if sensing the significance of the moment, Cabero gave a soft woof of approval, causing both women to laugh. The sound carried into the restaurant, where it mixed with the clatter of plates, the sizzle of the grill, and the 100 other sounds that made up the daily symphony of Maria's kitchen. But now there was something new in that familiar melody, the promise of change, of growth, of something extraordinary taking root. Later that evening, as the last customers departed and the staff began their closing routine, Elena stood in the center of the empty dining room. She watched as Marco and Sophia playfully argued over music choices while wiping down tables, as Maria tallied the day's receipts at the counter, as Luna and Sol dozed in their pen, and as Cabero maintained his vigilant post by the door. For the first time since Roberto's passing, she felt the warmth of belonging, of having not just a purpose, but a family. "Ready to head home?" Marco asked, twirling his car keys. "We can drop you off tonight, and tomorrow we'll start moving your things." Elena nodded, gathering her worn purse and the contract, her new beginning. As they stepped into the cool evening air, Cabero padding faithfully beside them, she realized that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness came not from grand gestures, but from simply following where love leads, even if that love comes with 4 paws and a gently wagging tail. 3 months after Elena signed her contract, the upstairs apartment at Maria's Kitchen had become a testament to what love and community could create. The once dusty storage space now glowed with warm colors, its walls adorned with local artwork and photographs of cooking classes in action. Luna and Sol, growing into gangly adolescents, had their own corner filled with beds and toys, while Cabero claimed the window seat overlooking the street below, maintaining his self-appointed role as guardian of the expanding family. But the true transformation wasn't in the physical space. It was in what was happening downstairs. "Remember to keep stirring," Elena guided gently, moving between the portable cooking stations set up in what had once been the restaurant's private dining room. "The key to risotto is patience." Around her, 12 seniors focused intently on their pots, some working in pairs, others determined to master the technique solo. "Mine's too sticky," complained Mr. Chun, a retired accountant who'd barely cooked a day in his life before his wife passed away 6 months ago. "Add a little more broth," Elena suggested, demonstrating the proper amount. "Cooking is like life. Sometimes we need to adjust as we go along." From his spot near the door, Cabero watched the proceedings with his usual dignified attention. He'd developed an uncanny ability to sense when participants needed encouragement, often padding over to rest his head on a discouraged cook's knee or offer a gentle nudge to someone who seemed lost in sad memories. The Cooking for One, Dining with Friends program had started small, just 6 participants meeting twice a week. But word spread quickly through the neighborhood senior centers and community boards. There was something special happening at Maria's kitchen, people said. Something more than just cooking lessons. "It's not just about the food," Elena had explained to Maria one evening, as they watched the seniors lingering over coffee and their self-prepared meals. "It's about creating connections. Many of them haven't had anyone to share a meal with in months, sometimes years." Maria had nodded, understanding perfectly. She'd seen how the participants arrived earlier each week, staying later to chat, how they'd begun exchanging phone numbers, making plans to meet outside of class, how their shoulders straightened a little more each time they successfully completed a dish. But the senior program was just the beginning. Elena's Hope's Kitchen initiative had blossomed into something neither she nor the restaurant staff had initially imagined. Tuesday evenings now belonged to the Family Food and Literacy program, where parents and children learned to read recipes together, combining basic cooking skills with reading comprehension. Thursday afternoons saw teenagers from the local high school learning kitchen mathematics and basic business skills while preparing meals for the local shelter. "You've created something remarkable here," Sophia observed one afternoon, helping Elena organize supplies for the next day's classes. "Did you see Sarah's mother yesterday? I've never seen her smile like that." Elena paused in her inventory counting, remembering the shy single mother who'd barely spoken during her first class 2 months ago. Yesterday, she'd proudly demonstrated her pasta-making technique to newer participants, her daughter beaming beside her. "They just needed a chance," Elena replied softly, absent-mindedly scratching Luna's ears as the young dog helped herself to a spot on Elena's lap. "Like someone gave me." The impact of Hope's Kitchen extended beyond its participants. Local businesses had begun donating supplies, impressed by the program's results. The library partnered with them for special events, and the community college's culinary program sent student volunteers. Even the local news had done a feature story, focusing on how a stray dog had inadvertently sparked a community revival. But perhaps the most profound changes were the quiet ones, the small victories that wouldn't make headlines but meant everything to those involved. Like Mr. Chun mastering his risotto and hosting dinner for his adult children for the first time in years. Or the teenage volunteer who discovered a passion for teaching while helping younger kids learn fractions through measuring ingredients. Or the elderly widow who found herself with dinner invitations for every night of the week. One evening, as Elena locked up after a particularly successful class, she found Marco setting up chairs in the main dining room. "What's all this?" she asked, watching as he arranged them in a circle. "Community meeting," he explained, grinning. "Word's gotten out about Hope's Kitchen. We've got people from 3 other neighborhoods wanting to start similar programs. They're coming tomorrow to learn how we did it." Elena felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I never imagined." "None of us did," Marco agreed, pausing to scratch Sol's belly as the puppy rolled hopefully at his feet. "But that's the thing about hope, isn't it? It grows." Later that night, Elena sat in her window seat with Cabero, watching the city lights twinkle below. The dog's head rested heavily on her lap, his presence as steady and reassuring as always. On her coffee table lay folders of lesson plans, participant stories, and program outlines, everything she'd need to help other communities start their own versions of Hope's Kitchen. "You clever boy," she murmured to Cabero. "You knew exactly what you were doing that morning, didn't you? Leading them to us, starting this whole chain of events. Caballero's tail thumped softly against the cushions, his amber eyes reflecting the wisdom that had drawn them all together. From somewhere downstairs came the sound of Sophia's laughter mixing with Maria's voice, probably planning the next day's menu. The puppies dozed in their corner, occasionally twitching in their dreams. Elena reached for her notebook, the one Roberto had given her years ago for lesson planning, and opened to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, "Hope's Kitchen, a guide to building community through food and love." Below it, she began to write, capturing not just the practical details of running the program, but the heart of what made it work. The understanding that everyone has something to teach and something to learn, that healing often happens around a shared table, and that sometimes the most profound changes start with a simple act of kindness. As she wrote, Elena realized that Hope's Kitchen had become more than just a program. It was a testament to the power of second chances and the endless possibilities that arise when people come together to care for one another. And it all began with a copper-colored dog with gentle eyes and a heart big enough to build bridges between lonely souls. 1 year to the day after Caballero first appeared in Maria's Kitchen's back alley, the restaurant hummed with an energy that spilled out onto the sidewalk and into the warm evening air. Tables had been pushed together both inside and out, creating one long, winding path of fellowship that seemed to embrace the entire neighborhood. The occasion was the first annual Hope's Kitchen community celebration, though most attendees simply called it Caballero's Day. Paper lanterns strung between trees cast a gentle glow over the gathering, while the aromas of 100 different dishes, some from Maria's Kitchen, others brought by community members, created an invisible tapestry of shared cultures and stories. Elena stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Caballero sat beside her, his posture as dignified as ever, though a bit of gray now dusted his muzzle. Luna and Sol, now fully grown but still puppyish at heart, weaved through the crowd, accepting pets and treats with characteristic enthusiasm. Remember when you couldn't even look people in the eye? Maria appeared beside Elena, pressing a glass of wine into her hand. Now look at you, the heart of all this. Indeed, the transformation was remarkable. Elena moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, her silver hair styled fashionably, wearing a deep blue dress that Sophia had insisted on buying for the occasion. But the greatest change was in her spirit. The way she carried herself, the light in her eyes, the ready smile that had replaced her former hesitation. At one table, Mr. Chun was enthusiastically explaining his latest cooking experiment to a group of newcomers. It's fusion, he announced proudly. Chinese risotto with traditional seasonings from my mother's recipes. Elena helped me perfect it. He's teaching a class on Chinese cooking basics next month. Elena confided to Maria, "Can you believe it? A year ago, he could barely boil water." The celebration wasn't just about food and fellowship, though there was plenty of both. Throughout the evening, people stood to share stories of how Hope's Kitchen had changed their lives. Sarah's mother, now employed as a prep cook at an upscale restaurant, spoke about how the literacy program had given her the confidence to pursue her culinary dreams. A teenager described how the business skills she learned had helped her start a successful weekend baking business. Representatives from 2 other neighborhoods shared progress reports on their own versions of the program. "You've started a movement," Marco observed, joining Elena with a plate piled high with food. "The mayor's office called yesterday. They want to establish Hope's Kitchen programs in every district." Elena shook her head, still amazed by how far things had come. "We'll need to train more coordinators and establish guidelines for maintaining the personal touch. We can't let it become just another program." Already thinking ahead, Sophia laughed, dropping into a nearby chair. "But first, you need to see what we've prepared for tonight's surprise." On cue, Marco whistled sharply, catching everyone's attention. The crowd quieted as Maria stepped into the center of the gathering, holding what appeared to be a large, leather-bound book. "1 year ago," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air, "a very special dog led us to a very special person. We thought we were helping someone in need, but instead, we found someone who would help us all discover what community really means. She opened the book, revealing it to be a photo album. This is the Hope's Kitchen story so far. Every class, every success, every moment that showed us what we could become when we open our hearts to each other. The album passed from hand to hand as Maria continued speaking. There were photos of the first senior cooking class, Elena's uncertain smile barely visible as she demonstrated chopping techniques. Images of the apartment renovation, showing the community coming together to create Elena's new home. Snapshots of children proudly displaying their first successfully baked cookies, of teenagers teaching seniors about smartphones while learning about traditional recipes in return. And through it all, Cabero appeared in photo after photo watching over cooking classes, comforting discouraged participants, dozing in his window seat as Elena worked late into the night on lesson plans. The story told in these pages was as much his as anyone's. But we're not just here to celebrate the past, Maria announced. Elena, would you join me? Surprised, Elena made her way forward, Cabero naturally falling into step beside her. Hope's Kitchen has become bigger than any of us imagined, Maria continued, which is why the restaurant's board, meaning me, since I never actually created a board, has decided to make it official. As of today, Hope's Kitchen is an independent, nonprofit organization, with Elena as its executive director and this restaurant as its permanent home base. She handed Elena an envelope containing the legal documents, but Elena barely saw them through her tears. Around her, the gathering erupted in applause and cheers. Luna and Sol, picking up on the excitement, began to bark joyfully, while Cabero pressed closer to Elena's side, offering his steady support. There's more, Marco called out over the noise. Show her the back garden, Mama. The crowd moved as one toward the restaurant's back alley, the same spot where Cabero had first appeared. What had once been a utilitarian delivery area had been transformed into a beautiful community garden, complete with raised beds for vegetables and herbs, comfortable benches, and a small fountain. But it was the bronze plaque mounted on the garden wall that brought fresh tears to Elena's eyes. Cabero's Garden, where hope found its home, dedicated to all who have the courage to follow where kindness leads. As the celebration continued around them, Elena found a quiet moment to sit in the garden with Cabero. Did you know? She whispered to him. That morning when you came looking for help, did you somehow know all this would happen? Cabero's amber eyes held their usual gentle wisdom as he rested his head on her lap. From inside came the sounds of laughter, music, and the unmistakable noise of community, of people connecting, sharing, growing together. Luna and Sol had found their way to a group of children who were gleefully teaching them new tricks, while Marco, Sofia, and Maria moved through the crowd, making sure everyone felt welcome. Elena looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Roberto would have loved this, she said softly. He always said one act of kindness could change the world. I never really understood what he meant until now. Cabero's tail thumped gently against the garden path, and Elena smiled, scratching behind his ears. Tomorrow there would be classes to teach, programs to organize, and new challenges to face. The work of building and maintaining community never really ended. But tonight was for celebrating how far they'd come and the countless possibilities that lay ahead. As if reading her thoughts, Cabero stood and gently tugged at her sleeve, his signal that it was time to rejoin the party. Elena rose, straightening her dress and taking a deep breath of the garden's herb-scented air. Around her neck hung a key, not just to her apartment above the restaurant, but to the building that would house Hope's Kitchen's expanding programs. In her heart, she carried something even more precious: the knowledge that home isn't just a place, but a tapestry of connections woven from love, courage, and the willingness to help others find their way. Together, elderly woman and copper-colored dog walked back into the light and noise of the celebration, back into the embrace of the community they had helped create, one meal, one lesson, one act of kindness at a time.